Hetapu, Assalamu alaikum, Namaste, Haru Nepper. This is Kasakma Keperu with another broadcast for you. In this broadcast, I want to talk about stop trying to bend the spoon. But before I do that, I want you to hit the like button on this video. This is your first time to my channel. Welcome. Hit the subscribe button to get notifications on when I go live or when I upload recorded videos. And also don't forget, you can become a Patreon supporter. And as a supporter, you get access to instructional videos on the esoteric that deal with how to perform a ritual, proper breathing techniques, how to create a magical amulet. And also, if you are a Patreon supporter at the Osirian level, we have hypnosis classes there where we can reprogram your mind to do all kinds of wonderful feats. And some of that I'll be sharing with you in this video. So consider becoming a Patreon supporter. Of course, you can cancel at any time. Try out the videos. If you don't like them, you can hit cancel. Now, let's get on to the subject matter at hand. Also, lastly, please share this video with family and friends because we really want to get this revolution started and get this information out there. And just help people because a lot of people are not aware of the extraordinary powers that they possess. And we want to educate them on that, okay? That they are not human beings. They're not sinful creatures. They are divine beings. They are God men and God women. So how are you guys doing today? How are the Magi doing? Just to let you know, I was away at a retreat, and the retreat was interesting. And when you're brought up in a magical society like me, and when you've learned to use your power and get proficient at it, you tend to forget that you have the power. Because it's like going to a gym and working out. You know what I mean? And you work out so much, and you're walking down the street, and a fine, sexy lady goes, "Whoa, how are you?" And you're like, "Oh, I'm okay." And you forget that you've been working out. You look all buff and swollen and everything, but it's like that. I have a schedule and I stick to my schedule of my meditations and my mental exercises and the breathing exercises so that when magical stuff happens, I forget that I am really the cause of those things happening and not just susceptible to the effects of the world. Case in point, when we were on the retreat, they said, well, part of you being on a retreat is that you're going to have to go and have dinner with everybody. And I was like, oh, dinner? I don't want to go have dinner. But I said, okay, I got to do it. I went, you know me, I went to the I-ching oracle and said, God, should I go to dinner? And the I-ching was like, go to dinner. And I was like, crap, right? And one of the things the reason why I do that, because I don't want to have to, mingle with people that I don't maybe like, because I have a hard time with, I'm not a person who's phony. Like, I'm genuine when I'm talking to you, and I don't engage too much in small talk. I don't like small talk. So it's something you have to do, right? So I ended up getting there late for some reason. And just to say the dinner was awesome. I was like, I could order anything I wanted and it was great. But prior to going, I had meditated and said to myself that when I get there, certain things will happen and everything will unfold the way I wanted to because I'm God man. So, I get to create my situations in life. So anyway, I got there, and not only when I got there, there was a seat for me, but it was next to this one girl who I didn't really know, and her and I started talking, and turns out she was actually from the same background, like a racial background as me. And we had so much in common. And these individuals were comprised of people that come all across from the United States, right? So I'm talking with her. So I'm saying, well, where are you from? What office are you from? And she's like, oh, I'm here I'm here locally. I'm like, what? Really? Our office? I never ran into you. I didn't know you worked here. I'm like, wow, okay. And it turns out she's in my office upstairs, and she's actually an intern. And that was just like really awesome meeting her. I told her I would come back to office, and her and I would meet up and talk more later and chit chat and get into some really deep stuff. But we were talking about racial identity and things like that. So after I left, I mean, it was a super good conversation. The food was great. They had my seat ready. The waiter was at my beck and call. And I had forgot that the reason why that whole thing worked out so well and meeting her was so fortuitous was the fact that I had planned that out magically the night before. And I remember I was like, okay, I'm going to meditate because I'm going to make sure that everything works out and there's no full pause on my point, because I got to make sure I don't like slip up and say something I don't want to really say, because in this PC culture you got to be very, very careful. So it went really well. And my point there is to let you know that if you're a magi and you're practicing your magic correctly, these magical things will happen. Another case in point, which was today, actually, there is a person in my parking lot who has this is like a minor thing. I'll tell you something else too. Who has a blue car. I like this blue car, and I see this blue car often, right? And I said to myself, I want to know whose car that is, because I know everybody here. So after we did a presentation, I decided to leave early, get out of there real quick. And I'm walking down the street, and lo and behold, I see this young girl walking in front of me, and she gets into the blue car. I said, oh, it's her car. And I knew her too. I said, that's her car. Wow, interesting. And one more example or case study was that I was moving from a very artistic neighborhood. This is called the LES. It's where a lot of artists and people are there. And I moved there for a year. It didn't turn out the way I wanted to, so I was going to leave and move into back. And I had a co-op at the time, so I said, I'll kick the tenants out and I'll move into the co-op. But they only let you move in on certain days. So I said, well, I'm going to do my magic and I'll be able to move in on a Tuesday, even though the only day you can move in is technically on a Saturday. So I'm walking in Tuesday, and the security walks right up to me. And I'm not only am I walking in, but I have the movers right back of me. They're carrying my stuff. So the security walks and stands right in front of me and looks at me, and she says, we've got the elevator padded. It's waiting there for you and your moving crew. Go right in. And I was like, oh, okay. Because I was sneaky trying to do it on the down low to move my stuff back in when I can only do it on the Saturday, but that was a Tuesday. So that shows you like the power of your magic, how through what we call synchronicity, things line up and things work in your favor. You know what I mean? And I don't like to use the term that some Christians use, because they operate what they call out of faith. And they say, God favors me. God doesn't favor any one individual but the other. That's your own power that you're using. And you have to understand that, all right? God is no respecter of a person. So stop picking and choosing, like, oh, God favors me, God doesn't favor that person. That's essentially what you're trying to say. So cut that out. I don't like the way that sounds. So let's get into this whole thing about stop trying to bend the spoon. All right. This is going to be very esoteric for you guys. I know you guys like that. Hey, Hakeem. All right, man. Hakeem, enough. I know you're enthusiastic, brother, but chill with the chat box, okay? Chill. he's very excited. I get that way too. I actually did that on the chat, and they timed me out, and I was like, "Oh, I hate you guys. Why'd you time me out?" Because I was so excited, and I was like, "Oh, it's cool, brother. Just chill a bit, all right? You gotta give some other people time to respond. You don't want to monopolize the conversation. You know what I mean? But thank you for coming in, and thank you for your presence. We always appreciate your energy. And so, Takia, for you as well, we appreciate your energy. You're awesome. Thank you guys for coming in. Always love to see you guys. And so, what was I going to say? Oh, let's talk about the whole. I want to really get down to the details about how your magical power works. Because a lot of people don't understand it. And for that, let's go to a very wise sage who will give us an idea of how our magical power works. So can we do that? Can we hear some words of wisdom from the old sage? And many of you may have studied with him or know of him. Let me see if I can find one of his scriptures and his teachings here. Give me 1 second. I was actually listening to it earlier, so he's got to be here somewhere. He's got to be here somewhere. Yes, he is here. I see him right now. Give me 1 second. And here's the sage. And many of you may know him. This is our sage, Wesley Snipes. And he's going to teach us how to use our power and how we shouldn't use our power, more importantly. So let's let the sage Wesley Snipes educate us.
Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill.
Okay, sorry for the language, but let's hear that prophetic words of his.
Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill.
All right, all right. So I'm not sure if you understand what I mean by that. Okay, can we break this down? Okay, can we break this down? You know, modern science, especially in quantum physics, talks about the extra dimensions, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth. They're realizing there could be as many as 12 or 26 dimensions, right? And with each of those dimensions, it expands on the possibilities of our understanding. All right. Now, what the guru Wesley Snipes is saying here is that you're doing things the hard way, and it doesn't make any sense. Bottom line, when you say to yourself, I hope I have a good day tomorrow. Hope things go my way. I pray that I'll get this money so I can pay my light bill. That's skating uphill. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because, you know, or I'll never get a man as handsome as Kasank. Well, you know, you understand what I'm saying? Or, you know, it's not my lot in life to get a good paying job, or I could never win the lotto. You're skating uphill because you are endowed with certain abilities. You have certain extraordinary powers that you're not utilizing because you live in a society that not only hampers you by its belief system, its Sebek belief system. We know Sebek is the deity that governs beliefs, but it continually reinforces that to disarm you and to keep you from realizing your power and your potential. And it's because of that, our society is dangerous. It's dangerous to you as a divine being because it is what it's trying to do is to rob you of your status as God-man, to rob you of those powers. And it does it in two ways. Number one, by the belief system that's out there. And this belief system is disseminated through media, through the educational institutions, through universities, every place. And the second thing it uses is peer pressure, meaning that the minute you step out the bounds of the accepted norm, your peers will check you. And this is social pressure. They'll shame you. So the minute you start talking about there's a possibility of other dimensions, extraterrestrials, interdimensional beings, you become ostracized. And no one wants to deal with you. When in reality, you are acting in reality, and they're the ones who are delusional and limited in their abilities. So there needs to be a change, okay? But how does this change come about? Well, for that to come about, let's go to another sage, wise person. And let's go to, who should we go this time? We're going to go to Neo, the one, Neo, like the neocortex, okay? And let's see what Neo from the Matrix learned in order for him to actually be the one, okay?
Do not try and bend the spoon. That's impossible. Instead, only try to realize the truth.
What truth?
There is no spoon.
There is no spoon?
Then you'll see that it is not the spoon that bends, it is only yourself.
The Oracle will see you now.
Now, why was that important for Neil to grasp that, to understand that you can't bend the spoon? You know, it's impossible, but you need to bend your mind. So in other words, when we talk about extra dimensions, what this is doing, what essentially Neil adapted was Neil bent the rules, okay, but he was able to bend his frame, his thinking, and basically neurolinguistic programming. The minute you accept a belief system and you operate from that belief system, we call that the meta frame. So everything you do is seen through that meta frame. And unfortunately, right now, we are left brain limited, and that's our meta frame. So we believe in the concrete, the physical, and we don't entertain the metaphysical. So when I teach people, especially when I put them into hypnosis, what I'm dealing with is adding an extra dimension to their thinking. I'm bending their thought process. I'm showing them that there is another dimension from which they can operate from. All right. And that's really very important, because you need to understand that these things are possible, and you're never going to understand that operating out of today's modern society, because they're hell bent on keeping you contained within the box. You know, the colloquial saying, think out of the box. That's how you should be thinking. So I want to play something for you that really goes into the whole idea of the extra dimensions, and it may seem a little bit above you. It may get very scientific-y, you know. Don't worry about that, because your conscious self, your true self, who you really are as consciousness, will process the information. All right, but it's important that you're at least exposed to it. So let's just follow along with this, because I really want you to understand how extra dimensions are not only physical dimensions, but they're extra dimensions in thoughts as well. So let's go into this.
Hey there, I am Science File, the artificial intelligence. This is what a cube would look like in the fourth dimension. It also has its own name, a tesseract. However, by seeing this image, you cannot claim that you experienced the fourth dimension, because it is represented in our three-dimensional universe, on a two-dimensional screen in your one-dimensional brain. But what if I told you our universe is made up of not 3, but 11, or even 26 dimensions? We'll speak about that in a second. First of all, at least to imagine how a fourth dimensional object would look like, we have to make an analogy using our 3 dimensions. Suppose that somewhere there is a two-dimensional universe, with two-dimensional beings living on it. They can only move on 2 axes. Now imagine that you take your hand and pass it through their world. As their line of sight is only a one-dimensional line, as your hand progresses through their world, they will see the tip of your fingers appearing, then the rest of your hand slowly coming in. They would constantly see only an infinitely small division of your hand, corresponding to their one-dimensional line of sight. Those beings would think of your hand as a shape-changing two-dimensional object, just as an MRI scan views your brain. Now imagine that someone from the fourth dimension comes to our three-dimensional space and puts his hand through. Let's say it's not a hand, but a tesseract. As it would pass through our 3D space, we would see it shape-changing, just like our hand did, but in a different way. It gets even more awesome if we consider that time is the fourth dimension. Then, the 4D object would be able to control his time. If he were a living being, he could change his age at will, just as we could move our hand through the two-dimensional world at will. Okay, but let's get back into our own universe. Remember I said that it has more than 3 dimensions? And probably a lot more. The M theory, which unifies all the superstring theories, says that our universe is made up of 3 spatial dimensions that we are all familiar with, 1 time dimension, and 6 more small spatial dimensions. According to the string theory, these 6 additional dimensions would have very interesting properties. If we count the 4th dimension being the time, and the fifth dimension would allow us to travel through all the parallel universes that had the same initial coordinates as ours. The sixth one would allow us to travel in time in any of those universes. In the seventh dimension, you could travel to any possible world, no matter of their initial coordinates. In the eighth, we could travel in time in all those universes. In the ninth dimension, we can compare all the possible universe histories, starting with all the different possible laws of physics and initial conditions. In the 10th and final dimension, we arrive at the point in which everything possible and imaginable is covered. Beyond this, nothing can be imagined by you, mortals, which makes it the natural limitation of what we can conceive in terms of dimensions. I swear, I didn't make this up. But, where are they and why can't we observe any of these dimensions? Imagine there is a very long rope stretched between two mountains. You sit 1 kilometer away from it, and you know there is an ant walking on the rope. Because of the very long distance, the rope seems to be a one-dimensional line, with only length, as its width would be unnoticeable. If you were asked to give the ant's coordinates on the rope, you would be able to say only one piece of data, the distance between the ant and the end of the rope. But in reality, we know that the rope does have thickness, even though it is hard to see from 1 kilometer away. Take a pair of binoculars and you will observe the second and third dimensions of the rope. The same thing goes for the other 6 spatial dimensions in our universe. They are on such a small scale that they are indistinguishable from the normal 3 dimensions. These extra dimensions can be represented in form of a Calabi-Yau manifold. I don't know what the is this. Don't ask me to explain it. But again, why don't we simply take a microscope and observe them? As I said, they appear on a very small scale, called the Planck scale, and we are not able to look so deep in the fabric.
Okay, so Planck is a measurement, it's a scale, it's a measurement of height or time. But we don't need to go into any of that. That's not what we want to talk about today. So let me just get into the other thing here. The thing that we want to understand here is that realistically, what we are doing when we are adapting additional belief systems, when we're thinking out of the box, we're adding extra dimensions onto our thought process. Because right now, you could metaphorically say that we have a 2-dimensional way of thinking, which is true because when you're dealing with the left brain, you're dealing with a 2D realm, and the right brain's a 3D realm, all right? So what we have to do is get out of that and start adding extra dimensions to our thought process. And a way to do that is going into meditation or trance state or hypnosis, and then adapting a belief system that takes you out of that limitation. You understand what I'm saying? You have to understand the world was constructed in the way it is today by the ruling elite, meaning that they have put in place a belief system that you can't do these things. These things are they're part of the so-called paranormal, and that is the realm of spooky mysticism and stuff. And the people who practiced that were primitive back in antiquity. So, but that is not true. All you're doing is returning yourself, your true self, to a state of what it really is and who you really are, which is God, because you share in God's power, because God places consciousness within you. Now, let's get into this. Let's really talk about this. Who you are. When we talk about bending that spoon, why couldn't Neil bend that spoon? He had to first adopt the belief system and understand that the spoon did not exist. Now, one of the things is when I take people through trance and I communicate to their consciousness to adapt the new belief system is to understand that they do not exist as a physical being. You don't exist as a physical being. You are not a physical being. You must understand that. Though it gives a perception of reality, it is not. And what you have to also understand is when you get down to, I'm going to cross over here into these extra dimensions and these interdimensional beings, the reason that you can't readily see them because you're dealing with the 4th and 5th dimensions. You cannot perceive those other dimensions with the eyesight that you have now. Only using your 3rd eye will you be able to perceive them, or the uchat, okay? Which is why if you take a 2-dimensional being, if there was ever a 2-dimensional being, and you try to appear to that 2-dimensional being, because let's say you are a 3-dimensional person, there's 3 dimensions and 1 dimension of time. Okay, so that's the 4th dimension we live in. 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time. So if you try to appear to that two-dimensional being, that being could not perceive you. It would not understand what it's looking at. Same here. You are a fourth dimensional being, right? You're trying to perceive beings from other dimensions. You cannot. And if you do see them, what you would see is breaks in the matrix. You know, though you were perceiving something odd, you would not be aware of or understand what you are perceiving. Okay, so I say that to say this: those so-called academic scholars, those so-called scientists who come at you with their mumble jumble BS about, oh, you know, there's no life in outer space, there's no interdimensional beings, are either most likely lying, or number two, very, very ignorant. Because if you're dealing with interdimensional beings, you cannot perceive them because they're what? They're coming from the added dimensions, the different dimensions. And you, as a limited fourth dimensional being, cannot perceive them in this contained waking state of living in the 4D realm. There's the logic behind that. Do you understand that they're trying to play you like a fool? They're trying to tell you that our ancestors were stupid and primitive because they believed in spirits, deities, and interdimensional beings. No, they weren't. Our ancestors were able to put together chemical formulas, ayahuasca, DMT, that could take them out of the 4D realm so they can perceive beings from the 6th, the 7th, and the 8th dimension. That's how they knew that these beings existed. So don't tell me these beings don't exist. Just because you have no way of observing them because you're in the 3rd dimension, that doesn't negate the fact that they still exist. All right. Now, going back to what Neil was saying, is that, well, not Neil was saying, but what Neil discovered was that in order for Neil to bend the spoon, he had to add an extra dimension to his thinking, or he had to bend his mind, bend his traditional thought process. Come from society, social engineering, the consensus reality. Do you know what the consensus reality is, right? It's kind of like the mass collective agreement, where we come together as a group and we agree upon certain rules that we'll all play by. And sometimes those rules are very detrimental to us as divine beings, because we all can get into an agreement that we will not get outside of the parameters of the matrix, that we will not think out of the box. And therefore, you have at that point a race of people, a group of people, a nationality of people, a country that does not progress. It retards in its progress. And that's the state that we are in right now. And it's a state that is not natural to us. It's a state that was manipulated by the ruling elite to keep us into a certain paradigm of thinking, to keep us within certain parameters. Now, as Neil learned the secret, that he had to first understand that the spoon did not exist. There's no spoon. So first and foremost, for you to be able to work wonders in your life, you first have to understand that you do not exist. Now, with that understanding, then you can understand how you can heal miraculously. And in the Bible, Jesus was a healer, right? And you could perform those miracles of healing people from different diseases, because you understand the one fundamental truth is that your body is a holographic projection. Your body is not real. So therefore, I can heal your body. Now, let's take this logic a step further. The reason I can heal your body is due to quantum entanglement. What does that mean? That means that we are all connected. We are all one. So if we're all connected due to quantum entanglement, or one, or as the Buddha says, oneness, then therefore there's no disconnect. I communicate with every aspect of my being and every aspect of all the other beings out there. So let's go to another case study, as we can call it. This is from Michael Talbot, The Holographic Universe, where he explains this kind of theory of oneness and the quantum entangle principle, so we can understand this even better.
That implies that this notion that we go about our everyday lives with thinking of ourselves as separate from each other, and the cup is separate from the coffee that goes in the cup, that these notions are somehow what would you say, superficial or contradicted at a deeper level?
They're artificial, definitely, and Bohm really stresses this, and it's a very interesting notion, because in our Western way of thinking, we're so attached to the idea that when we come up with a concept like an apple or an electron or whatever, that exists out there, and we forget. It's kind of like fish unaware of the water in which they swim, that the conceptual pigeonholes we use, words, to describe reality, are phenomena inside our head. They're not out there. And most of the time, this is a philosophical quibble. But when you get down to quantum physics, and this is one of the reasons that Bohm came up with the holographic idea, it starts to have real effects. And one of those is it's been discovered that if you take two subatomic particles like electrons, in certain instances, when you do something to one, it will always affect the other, no matter how far apart they are. It's kind of like stories that you've heard of identical twins, where when one is hurt, the other feels the pain. And the problem is that we can find no process known to physics that explains how these could be sending a signal back and forth. In fact,
Because it would have to be faster than the speed of light.
instantaneous. It would have to be an instantaneous signal, and Einstein's theory of relativity said you can't have instantaneous signals, because it would mean that you could violate the time barrier and conceivably call your grandfather and tell him not to marry your grandmother. And most physicists say, well, this would be just too troubling to incorporate into a rational picture of reality. Bohm explains it in a different way, which is a very interesting way. And he says, if you imagine that you've got an aquarium in which you have a fish swimming, you have a TV camera facing the front of the aquarium, one facing the side of the aquarium, and you have a monitor attached to each camera. Now, you also imagine further that you come from a culture that's never seen aquariums, never seen fish, never seen monitors or cameras. All you are privy to is the two images on these screens. He says that maybe, if you look at these two screens, you're going to see a side view of a fish and a frontal view of a fish. And because you don't know what the deeper reality is, the reality of the aquarium, you may assume that these are two separate things. But
Two different fish.
Two different fish, two different objects. But every time one fish moves, the other is going to make a corresponding movement. Mm-hmm. And you may then jump to the conclusion that somehow the one fish is signaling the other, or communicating the other to say, hey, do this, instantaneously. And Bohm says this is what we've done with subatomic particles, that we assume that an instantaneous communication is going on, when that's not really what's going on at all. At a deeper level, a very holographic level of reality, every particle in the universe collapses to a sort of cosmic unity. They're not signaling each other. They're like that fish, where there's the level of the aquarium. And so what that means, talking about words, is that there is no separation between electrons. Furthermore, there's
Okay, so when he's talking about collapsing, he's talking about collapsing into what we call the singularity. The singularity is oneness.
no separation between people. And this has all kinds of very boggling implications, one of which is that we've always tried to understand, for example, psychic phenomena, like how could I get information out of your head in my head, as some sort of signal going back and forth. But if we're organized, if we live in a universe that's organized holographically, you no longer have to tackle it that way. It could be that I have the entire universe and every neuron, every cell, every atom, every electron in my head, and you do also. So when we can access that, we can access information that seems to be beyond our normal sensory reach.
Well, I'm very interested.
So I hope you really understood the profound notion of what he was getting at. What he was saying is that these left brain linear scientists, left brain linear, that's how they think, they're polarizing left brain thinking, come up with the idea, and they understood that these particles, like when one happens, when you working an experiment and you do something to one, the other one reacts no matter how far apart it is. So they were thinking that there was some transmission going on that was faster than the speed of light. When in reality, if you think it from a very right brain perspective, you think in terms of they're not two separate particles, they're really just halves of the whole. They're one. It's one, it's not separate. In fact, I think that it was Bashar that came up with a very, very damn interesting theory. Now, he said this one particle, we know that everything's made up of, atoms or whatever. But Bashar has said, what if you have this one particle, and this particle is moving beyond speeds you can imagine, faster than the speed of light, and this particle comprises everything in our known universe. So in other words, we're not talking about individual particles that comprise me, you, the wall, the train, the cars, but one particle moving so fast that it gives the impression of many particles, but really it's just one. So Michael Talbot is getting at that notion that really there's only just one thing. So there is no need to have communication that is going across space and time. But again, that's what you're dealing with left brain scientists. That's how they think, you know. So therefore, they postulated the what they call the grandfather paradox, you know, which I won't get into that. That's another thing. But anyway, so one of the things I want us to keep in mind in walking away from that is this. But let me answer, Nazim, your question. What is the purpose of interdimensional beings? Asking that question is like asking, okay, here's a mouse, right? What's the purpose of the chips in the mouse? What is the purpose of the chips in the mouse? It is to sustain the whole. It is for the whole to function. And for the whole to function, see, we're very ego-centered. Like, we're the only ones that have a purpose. There are things going on. There are beings, there are spirits, there's all kinds of different life forms. And everything has a form and a function and has a place. Everything has a interdependence and interrelationship. So for the whole to sustain itself and to function, it needs all of the parts to operate together and harmoniously. So that's the function of interdimensional beings. All right, so I want you to understand that very clearly, because again, we're too ego-centered to think that we are the only ones with a purpose and a function, and everything else out there is superfluous. God doesn't create superfluous stuff. God creates everything with its own form and function, and everything is needed for this thing called reality to function the way it is. All right. So what I want you to walk away from this with a clear understanding is you have to go about adding extra dimensions to the way you think. You have to go about accepting a new paradigm, a new frame of reference, in order for you to work miracles in your life, in order for you to get back to who you truly are. You understand what I'm saying? Because if you don't do that, if you don't get back to who you truly are, if you operate within the limitations and the parameters of this so-called fourth dimensional reality, do you know what we'll be doing if you don't get back to who you are? Can anybody in the chat box tell me? Do you know what we'll be doing if we don't get back to being our divine self? We'll be doing what our esteemed sage brother Wesley Snipes said.
Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill.
So I love that. So what you're going to be doing is well, I shouldn't say doing, but you're going to create problems in your life that don't need to be there. Problems created by your own limited thinking. Do you understand how the matrix works? Do you understand how this holographic universe works? If you tell this universe, if you tell the matrix that the only thing that is real is the physical, then it's going to comply. It's going to create a reality in which you have no control over anything in your life. If you tell the matrix that there is an outside world that you have no control over, it will create that reality for you. And what is the logical, natural line of thinking or conclusion from that is that you will be the victim of things. You will experience things that you have no control over, and you will go through ups and downs in life. Rather, if you adapt the correct belief system by saying there is no outside world, that the universe, everything is within me, and that I am God, I create my reality based on the belief systems that I harbor in my consciousness. And therefore, you will live a life of extraordinary power. Do you understand what I am saying? When I went to the I-ching and I told the I-ching, I'm looking to get into the priesthood, I'm looking to really expand my understanding of the universe and all that there is. The I-ching says when you begin this journey, you'll have two paths to choose. One where you can go into public life and help people and share your knowledge, or the other one where you can be a sage on a mountain and be secluded. Either one is up to you. I chose to spread this information, to go out there and teach people, hey, you know what? there is extra dimensions to your thought process, to the way you think. And if you adapt these added dimensions, you will be able to perform miracles. But if you turn away from that knowledge, you will always live a life that's limited, very limited. You see, this is why I tell people that the Illuminati or the ruling elite has won. They have won. They've already won. The battle and the war is over. The world that exists today is the world that they wanted us to be in. We've already shifted to their reality, and now we're just playing it out. And what I'm asking you to do is shift to a higher reality and get out of this reality. But that's your choice. That is your choice. And when you decide, whatever you decide, you're going to take certain people with you. People who are vibrating on a certain frequency, which is the concrete reality that maybe you're accepting right now, will go with you. Other people who are vibrating at a higher frequency in 5D maybe will then take that plunge with you into the newer realms. Nazim, I hope I explained that the third and the fourth dimensions. I said that there's 3 dimensions of space and 1 of time. That's the difference, okay? So I want you to think about how you want your life to unfold. Dimethyltryptanol, I hope I said that right. It's a chemical that your third eye naturally produces, or when you go into trance or meditation, you produce DMT. It takes you to alternate states of consciousness. It takes you to the 5D realm and beyond. That's what DMT is. You can smoke it, or you can you already naturally secrete it, but we don't secrete enough of it because through the use of fluoride in the water and the toothpaste, the ruling elite has calcified the pineal gland so that it becomes basically inoperable. So there's recommendations of getting fluoride out of the water using a toothpaste that doesn't have fluoride in it, so that you can repair the third eye and experience those other different levels and dimensions. Or you can try ayahuasca. That's another thing that you can try. And that will, in a way, in a very big and profound way, change your reality, because it will take you to these other dimensions where you will encounter different dimensional beings that will give you advice and counseling. But you got to be ready for that trip, because it could be, for some who have not done shadow work, if you have a lot of negative things trapped in your spirit, and when you take ayahuasca, it is going to come at you. It's going to make you have a very, very negative experience. So it's not advisable for everyone. So if you're interested in doing DMT or ayahuasca, I can do a video on that, but I really prescribe that you go to the oracle and ask the oracle, should you take one of these medicines? Because that's basically what they are, is medicines, because our ancestors used them to communicate with different beings and to get counseling. The ruling elite, those who are in power, use DMT and use ayahuasca to get counseling from dark beings. And those dark beings advise them how to manipulate time, how to manipulate space, how to keep the planet enslaved. Because you have to understand, we being cut off from communication with these beings are limiting us in terms of our knowledge of how reality works, of the world and of the universe. These beings are natural to the planet. They're natural. So if you want to look at them as something extraordinary, you can do that, but they're not. They have just as much right to be here as we do. In fact, many of them are older than us. So you have to understand that. But again, we've been indoctrinated into a thought process and a belief system, which makes these things seem crazy, of science fiction novels, but they're not. So anyway, again, my main message is to get you to now start looking into those extra dimensions of thoughts and to accept that. And what you want to do is, the conscious mind, the left brain, will not accept a new belief system, because the conscious mind is the critical faculty. It's the right brain under a state of trance hypnosis that will accept programming. and it's already accepted the limited programming of the matrix. So what you've got to do now is you have to reprogram that, and it has to be a consistency to it. You can't just do it one time and think, wow, I'm a magi now. It doesn't work that way. You have to consistently, through a process that culminates over time, that you will eventually purge the old belief system, and then the subconscious mind now accepts the new belief system as the dominant, what do we call that? Metaframe, the metaframe. Because right now your metaframe is a limited thought process. It is the process of thinking linearly, sequentially, and through time and space. You don't want that thought process. You want the thought process that takes you to the 5D realm and beyond. And as in this Asarian drama, the Asarian drama, the story of Asar and Aset, you understand that Haru, in order to subdue his animal spirit, which really what Set was, it's not going to go willingly. Your old belief system is not going to just say, okay, let me just give me some time to pack up my luggage and I'll be out of here. Goodbye, brain. It was nice being here for a while. No, the old belief system is going to fight you tooth and nail. It's not going to want to go. So you're going to have to do battle at Ben-Hutet. And Ben-Hutet was the battlefield where Haru became Harukuhuti and did battle with Set. So in the Kemetic tradition, we say that you're going to have to do battle at Ben-Hutet to get rid of your old belief system and to adapt the new belief system with the added dimensions, the bending of thinking, to get rid of the thinking that there is a spoon, to get rid of the thinking that you are a physical being. You are a holographic projection. So where's the projector? Good question. It is out in the universe somewhere that we have not found yet. All right, but we do know there is a projector, and you are nothing more than a screen where images are being projected on. You are the projection. Okay, so that means that there's a different reality out there that we have not experienced or know about, and that's where that information is being hoarded by the ruling elite, and they'll never reveal that information to us. It's trapped in the Vatican, because the Vatican is hoarding knowledge in their catacombs. That's what they do. So get rid of the old thinking. Give it its pink slip. Give it its walking papers. Embrace who you truly are, which is a divine being, devoid of time and space. You have no beginning and you have no ending. You are a being. You are infinity. You will always be. And I do like the statement, I am. Because from there, you know that you are anything. You can be anything. I am. I am. Okay? I am God. I'm a divine being. Hakeem, namaste. Thank you so much. Oh, wow. I'm just a squirrel trying to get a nut, man. That's all it is to it, you know? Thirsty for knowledge, trying to get all of that. So I want to thank all of you. If you get an opportunity, please sign up for a Transmastery Hypnosis, where we reprogram your belief system so you can take on the thinking of a God, which is really who you are. Be who you were meant to be. Okay, please don't call yourself a sinful creature or human being. That is not who you are. You are beyond that. You're so much more. So embrace your legacy. That's why our ancestors wanted us to know who we were, and they want us to live with that knowledge of who we were, and to bring into fruition a world where anything was possible. So this is Kasak Ma Keparu, son of Ma'at and Tahuti. My aunt is a beautiful goddess, Hedaru. Until my next video, Amun Ra.